Okay, so hello everyone. Good evening, morning, afternoon from wherever in the world you are joining from. First of all, we warmly welcome you to our exciting webinar on accelerated finance leadership. It's hosted by Hub of Finance Transformation, and it's going to be presented by our very special speaker and leadership expert trainer, Talita Ferreira, who has already joined us from United Kingdom. We are highly thankful to her for her time to share her leadership insights with our global community of finance professionals. So just before moving on, I would like to quickly tell you about the logistics of this webinar. It's going to be almost 2 hours webinar, and we will be having some Q&A also at the end of the session. So even during the session, if you have any question, just please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and we will try to address as maximum questions as possible during the Q&A. And also the leader, she will be having some more activities during the session. So I hope you will find it more engaging and you can take some actionable takeaways from this 2 hours workshop. And as we all know that the leadership, of course, it plays a very crucial role, and we being a finance professionals, most of us usually focus on hard skills, analytics and technologies and leadership is usually we're not focused more on this area. And I think to reach to the C-suite level, to the level of CFO or finance director or to some senior level positions, of course we need a very high level, we have to demonstrate a very high level of leadership to make influence and impact within the organization. So that's what this program is all about. And just without any further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Talita. Talita, can you take from here?
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to have you with me. I'm just going to share my screen with you so that I can, I'm going to share my screen with you so that I can run through my presentation. So we're here to talk about accelerated finance leadership, and I'm so happy that you've taken the time out to join me this evening or this afternoon, as it is for me. So a bird's eye view of what we will do today. So I'm going to start the session just by telling you a little bit about myself, some of those key insights from my own career and why I believe there's a substantial insight in there for you as an individual participant. I'll also talk a little bit about the 7 shifts to the transformation of leadership and how I got to those 7 shifts. And it's all research-based, research that I did during the COVID period, which I will actually share with you. And then finally, we'll get into the 5 archetypes that I think a finance leader should have to be really successful and to thrive in future. And I'll hand over to Mohammed to tell us a little bit about a finance program that we're going to launch. And of course, we'll give you time to ask me any questions. Let's get going and let's start telling you about all those insights. So who am I and what am I about? So I'm a chartered accountant, like many of you are, and I work mainly for large organizations like KPMG, Investec Bank in South Africa, and then BMW. And I spent 17 years working for BMW in different roles. And about 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to leave corporate life and I wanted to have a bigger impact. So I wanted to share some of those learnings. But what I also don't want to do is I don't want to just become a person who only trains or coaches. I still want to stay extremely connected to business. So I also have 2 non-executive directors positions. So I sit on 2 boards of companies that are both regulated banks. So one is Ford Credit Europe, which is very closely related to Ford Motor Company, but is a regulated bank in the UK. And Tandem Bank, which is a smaller, faster growing, more dynamic bank. So quite 2 opposites for me as well. So I spend my time as a non-executive director and chair of audit committees. I also train directors for the Institute of Directors and mainly in leadership because I think it is so, so important. And I'll explain how I made this change from finance professional to people trainer, let's say on leadership in a few minutes. And then the other thing that I do is I coach and mentor CFOs. In my career, I was always in a very large organization, so BMW, for instance, who has loads of finance professionals and finance directors. leaders. And if you work in a large market, like I did, I worked in the UK, you are always asked to mentor or be a coach for other aspiring finance leaders. So I took that a little bit further, qualified as a coach, and I always coach about 3 or 4 finance leaders, never any more, because otherwise I can't give them the attention that they need. So let's talk a little bit about something that I always say about my career. And I'm going to say it really slowly so that it has lots of impact for you. For a third of my career, I was only living half of my potential. Again, a third of my career, only half of my potential. And why do I say that? So the first person that I led when I came out of my accounting articles called me an awful leader. And she was totally right. I had not yet learned that I needed to adapt my approach as a leader to what she needed. And she needed more of a coaching approach, more of a hand-holding approach. And I had just come out of articles where it was very dynamic, we were very analytical, we were all very driven. And we didn't really think about taking people along with us or adapting our style to people. And I suppose it was what I was used to. It was what I saw others doing. So she was the role model for me, or other people were the role models for me. And that's then the approach that I used for her. And it was like a real great gift that she gave me, because I could realize really early in my career, this was in my 20s, that I needed to be more of a leader and spend more time on thinking about the individuals that I led and what they needed from me. And I'll share some more of those insights as we go along this evening. So the second thing that really stands out for me is from the very first day that I became a CFO, I was also a chief people officer. So the role was a dual role. And I can remember sitting down with the CEO, and the CEO saying to me, well, Talita, I don't think you'll do this job for very long, this dual role of HR, because you'll probably do it like every other finance professional that came before you, and they all did it like controllers. And then it'll be the perfect excuse or opportunity for me to have it reporting directly to me. And this was a little bit like a slap in the face or a red rag to a bull, whichever analogy suits you. And I decided on that very day that I was going to be very vulnerable, allowing myself to be very vulnerable. And I use that word really, really consciously today with you, because I decided I was going to rely totally on my team, totally on that HR team to teach me how to be a good HR leader. And it was very uncomfortable, because as a finance leader, you always want to be in charge, know what you're doing, have all the answers. And I couldn't do that. And I always say that that was one of the things that unlocked that potential of mine, because I had to totally rely on my team around me. And so it started me on this journey of realizing that I had two perfect halves of this whole. And the two perfect halves are really this analytical, driven finance leader who's quite strategic, but also this people-orientated leader who knows what inspires, challenge, motivates people. And it really was very insightful for me along that journey. The third thing was I climbed myself all the way to the top 300 group of BMW. And I realized when I got there that I wasn't going to be inspired for the next 20 years. And that was quite a really big wake-up call for me, because I had always thought that I would be with BMW my whole career and different positions around the world. And I'm very happy to say that by leaving, I unlocked my passion 4 years ago. I wrote my first book, and I feel like I'm on the right journey to help and inspire finance professionals to be the best leaders that they can possibly be. So I feel like during that career of mine, I unlocked this superpower of understanding how impactful this leadership piece can be. Mohammed already said right at the beginning, leadership is so important in any finance position. And I can really tell you that it unlocked such a wealth of opportunity for me, because I could take on bigger projects, I could do more things, because I really knew how to inspire and how to help people on the journey with me. And I'll share some of those insights and more of those insights as I go along this evening. The first thing is I want to please ask you to use the chat box and tell me a little bit about your experience. What do you think needs to make us, what do we need to thrive as leaders? So what do you think? I'm going to look at the chat box now, which is here on the other side of my screen. So please tell me in the chat box what you think we need to thrive. Mohammed, that chat box is very quiet. Do we have any participants with us? Thank you, Khalid.
Yeah, develop teams.
Developing teams, yes, definitely. The right attitude. I love that. I love that, Veena. That's a good one. Let's see some more. Being the driving force. Yes, a trusting environment. That's also a very good one. Yes, we're serving. Fantastic. Communication. Yes. Delegation. Yes. I love it. All your comments are so spot on. So thank you. Thank you for those who have commented for me. Let's go see. Oh, there's some more. Unboss. Oh, that's a good one. So not just be the boss, sometimes be part of the team. I think that's what Khalid means. Not just being the boss, but also being part of the team, helping to brainstorm with the team. Yes. Ownership. Yes. Teamwork, reliability. Thank you, Moses. Love that as well. Role model, giving vision. Fantastic. Okay, I see that we've now got interaction, Mohammed. So that's very, very good. We have some interaction there from the group. Great. So I often get asked this question about what do we need to thrive in leadership? And from those experiences that I have through that USP of being a CFO and being a chief people officer, I came to the conclusion that we need to do three things to thrive and to be really, really good at our jobs. And the first thing is to adapt your specialism to your business. So very often we are specialists in our field. We are subject matter experts. But what we don't do is adapt that to the business, to the industry that we are in. And if you don't manage to make that leap to adjusting it to the industry that you're in or the business that you're in, you won't thrive as much. And I suppose a lot of finance professionals spend a lot of time, especially if they're business partners, in understanding the business because it's part of their role. But actually, whatever role you are doing, you need to make sure that you adapt, that you are having a look at how can I adapt my specialism to this organization to make sure that I thrive within this organization. The second part is your own self-development. And I so often see that finance professionals get caught in a trap. We get caught in the trap of we're too busy. And because we are so busy, we don't have time to develop ourselves. But I honestly believe if you want to be resilient, if you want to thrive, you need to focus on your own development as a person, as a leader. Because sometimes we get promoted before we're absolutely ready. And if you've developed yourself as a leader, you can make that jump better. So I always see that the people who self-engage in their own development and their own growth are always readier for positions. So I sit in so many performance appraisals where we appraise people or succession planning discussions in boards. And you can really see how a board views people or how a senior team views people. And they look for people who are developing themselves, who are getting themselves to that next place. The third thing then that's really important is individual and collective growth and development of the team. We also need to make really, really sure that we are developing that team that is there with us. And what I mean with developing the team is I'm not talking about a once a year finance away day. It's consistent development of that team. And I always say that every interaction with a team as a collective is an opportunity to grow and develop together. It's a little bit like that unboss from Khalid, that we need to unboss ourselves, be part of the team, grow and develop together. Otherwise, we don't unlock potential. And why do I say that these three things help you to thrive? The first thing is, if you don't adapt your specialism, you won't be very good at your job. If you don't grow and develop yourself as a leader, you will not thrive. You will not be resilient. You won't be adaptable. And the third thing is, if you're not growing and developing the team at a team leadership level, then the team won't be high performing, which is quite a shame. So we need all of those three things to really thrive within leadership. And we need to focus on all three of those things. I want to talk a little bit about COVID. So 12 months ago, in the heat of COVID, or maybe it was about 13, 14 months now ago, it felt a little bit like that part of me that was training finance professionals in these business critical skills, or what some people call softer skills. It was a little bit feeling like pushing this boulder up a hill. And I realized the important thing was, it's not about just convincing people myself. It's also about understanding from other people about what matters to them. How do they think we should change our leadership, especially in COVID times? So I decided to start an interview series, and I called it the Global Leadership Hypothesis. And I interviewed 27 different people, thought leaders, people who really work with finance professionals in transformation most of their time. I interviewed some coaches. I interviewed a legal professional. I interviewed CFOs. I interviewed board directors who then told me what they expect of the CFOs that they are leading. So 27 people from across the world trying to find out what makes a great leader and what do people need to be inspired by leaders. And so I came up with the Global Leadership Hypothesis, and I asked those 27 people the same questions. What makes a great leader? What will hold a leader back from reaching their full potential as a leader? Where should we start? What is that starting point when you're a leader? How can you unlock that starting journey as a leader? Or how can you improve when you're already a leader? And how important is that interaction with others? So is that a really superpower when you know how to interact correctly? Or is that just a by the by? Is that core specialism and skill really important? And the last question that I asked is for them to share some of their super leadership stories or epic fails. And of course, you're very welcome to ask me later in the Q&A about some of those interviews, because I won't be going into them in too much detail now. I'll more go into the insights from what that told me about this leadership. So I'd like to ask you about your experience again, and I'd love you to use the chat box for me so that I can hear from you again. What inspires you? What do you think is the thing that you need most to be inspired by a leader? So tell me in the chat box again, what inspires you to follow someone? I love that. Role model, vision. Let's see. Diversity. Oh, that's a good one, Mohammed. Charisma. Yes, Sanik, that's a good one too. Charisma. Let's see a couple more. So give me a couple more comments. Yes, strong leadership. That's good. Ah, yes, that's a good one, Kalimula. So problem handling. Yes, being able to handle problems to show that you can adjust, be on top of the problem. Although I think we need to get lots of help from other people also when we have problems. Be intentional. I love that. Partnering. Yes, partnering can be very, very inspirational. Mentoring. Yes, being a role model, being honest. Thank you, Moses. That's a great one. Being supportive from Tahir. Ah, adaptability. Yes, Mohammed, we'll talk about adaptability a lot more. Oh, Asifa, I'm so happy that you bring empathy into it. So being empathetic, one of the more recent words that we need to think about. Effective communication, yes. And then from Yagnesh, values, yes, definitely. All those things really inspire us to follow a leader. Very good. Making an impact. Yes, Olaf. I think that's also a great one. So let's see from that research of mine, from interviewing those 27 people in different places in the world, different positions. Some were finance leaders, some were transformational leaders, some were sitting in boards. So there's a very, very good mix in there. There's also quite a lot of diversity within that group. So the first thing that the group said is the leader needs to provide direction. The leader has to have that passion, has to understand purpose, has to give that vision. Where are we going? What is it that we want to achieve here? So definitely number one, through all the conversations, was that direction, that vision. And of course, if the leader has passion and you can follow them, even better. Then the ability to take people on a journey, to inspire them, to engage them, to grow them, to develop them. So that was a really important theme, that it's very much about people, that people need to feel that inspiration from the leader, that you're taking into account how to grow them, that you're thinking about how to develop them, really thinking about all those elements really well. Then those softer elements. So that was a great shout out, Asif, about the empathy, because empathy came up to within this group, that some of those softer elements, or what I call business critical elements, like vulnerability, like empathy, like being able to embrace failure and learning from that failure. Humility was also one that came forward. So those things that feel a little bit more outside our comfort zone is becoming very, very important to people. And then the last one was role modeling, and role modeling the right behaviors. And that quite surprised me. I didn't expect that to be such an important element of what people expect of a leader. So that looking up, and you're an inspiring leader, but you are someone that they can aspire to follow because you're role modeling things that appeal to them. So that's a really, really key one, which I hadn't expected to be so clear coming through the research. So very often when I'm leading board sessions, or when I'm training board directors, we talk about role modeling behaviors from the top. And it's an exceptionally important thing because, as I just said, people are looking for those role modeled behaviors. So it's very much not just about what we say, but how we behave as leaders that will impact people. And it's not just the top of the organization or that board of directors right at the top. It's also those individual leaders on the right. How are they showing up every day? So are they showing up in a way where they're stressed? Are they showing up in a way where they're like a contagion, but for stress and for non-resilient behavior, if we could put it that way? Some of the mistakes I made in my career was, if I was in a bad mood, to come into the office and tell my secretary I was in a bad mood. And she would check what won't really work well in my calendar that day. But to be honest, actually, I needed more mechanisms to actually help me deal with that stress, to be more resilient. And through my career, I learned how to deal with those things, how to shift my own energy from that bad mood to a good mood, because I realized how I show up impacts my team. If I show up too stressed, we don't get to too many solutions. If I show up really calm and brainstorm and try to unlock their creative brilliance, I get a lot more from the team. And then, of course, it's also about that interaction at the levels between teams. How are the teams working? So really important, that last behavioral point about role modeling behavior, I think is such an important point that I just also wanted to share that with you, because I think it's so important when you want to climb that finance ladder to the top. And of course, it looks a little bit messy. It's all those interactions between people and in different teams. And of course, they all have an impact about great leadership and how people view us. So I would like to run a poll now, and I would like to ask you which elements that I've just shown you of being a great leader do you spend most of your time on? So I would like you to think perhaps of 2 of those. So I'm going to launch the poll here. So I'm going to open that poll. So there we go. So I've opened the poll. So please vote and tell me which 2 of these elements do you think as a leader you spend most of your time on? So just click on the one that most resonates with you. Good, I can see we've had 2 people vote already. So please choose 2. Great, 4 people have voted so far. Now 5 people. Good. I'll give it a bit more time. Good, I'll just give it another 10 seconds or so. So another 10 seconds, please pass. Okay, don't worry, Olaf, if you could only select one, that doesn't matter. That's okay too. You wanted C and E as well, okay. Perhaps Mohammed can check for us in the upcoming polls that we have them as multi-polls. So you wanted C and E. Okay, so that's why we have no one there. Good. So I'm going to close the poll. Let's see what the poll shows us. Good. So some would have chosen A as well. Okay, so Moses wanted A as well. And Olaf wanted E as well. So let's see. There we go. That's it. So C seems to be the winner here, but we would have had a few more others. Inspiring, engaging, and growing is where you think you're spending a lot of your time. That's very good. So normally when I do this, so I'm going to stop sharing our results and just talk through this with you. So normally what I see is that a lot of finance professionals spend their time on the day job and challenges that take up most of their time. So they spend a lot of time around F here. And they spend a lot of time around providing direction. So A and F are normally the winners when I present this, especially at board level. People get very caught up in the day job. And then what they don't do is create these engaging purposes for their teams and help to coach and develop. So I'm very happy in this group that there's a lot of people who is spending time on those things. So really, really well done. So let's go to where should the leader start? And what did that research show around where people should start, or what can leaders do as a starting point? So the first thing is self-awareness. It was hands down the biggest winner. It's about understanding yourself as a leader, understanding your values, your strengths, your impact. I want to ask you again, tell me in the chat box, how you think we can increase our self-awareness. So what can we do to increase self-awareness? Be very interested to see what you say. So tell me in the chat box, how do you think a leader can increase their self-awareness? Yes, that's a great one, Olaf. Asking feedback. Asking for feedback is a great way. Any other thoughts about what can we do? Yes, being skeptical and interactive. That's a great one, Kalimula. Yes. Personal development. Yes, through training. Very good. Almost like a self-audit. Love that. Self-audit and evaluation. Self-reflection. Yes, reflecting on our own behavior. Another great one, 360. Yes, getting a 360 from your team and your peers. Reflection. Love it. Reflection is superpower of a leader. We'll get to that, Yagnesh. It's reflection is one of the 5 archetypes. Yes, reading about leadership, learning, having that inquiring mind, and learning about emotional intelligence. Very good. So some great answers there. So definitely the research showed people should be more self-aware, and they have to focus on individuals. So a lot of the time what I see is that leaders don't focus on individuals. They try to have a one-size-fits-all. And that one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work. That one-size-fits-all approach gets us caught a little bit. So it's always focusing on individuals and thinking of being that greater sum of the parts. The other one is cultivating those traditionally soft skills, but what I believe are business critical. That vulnerability, empathy, developing storytelling. And I'll tell you, when we get to the 7 shifts, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Then building relationships to unlock influence. So really focusing on how to build good relationships. And building relationships is also about not always knowing all the answers, but having others help you to find the answers. Sometimes we tell a lot when we're finance professionals, but we don't listen so much. And that's also something about building relationships to unlock influence is not just about telling. It's also about listening. It's about understanding what matters to the other person and what drives that other person. So let's see what holds leaders back from reaching their full potential. So what this research showed very much is that fears hold people back. And common fears are things like losing control, not knowing everything, or trying to learn new things, but being afraid of doing that. So fears are really something that will hold leaders back. And it came so classically through this research that I did. So I interviewed one CFO, Gilliam Turner, and he's a serial CFO. So he goes from one company to the next, and he does it for short periods of time. So he likes that different perspective from working in lots of different companies. And he says the biggest, let's say, thing that holds people back or held him back as well personally is to think that he needed to know all the answers and that fear of not knowing the answers. Because if you're joining a new company and you're moving around all the time, you need to very, very much rely on the teams. And that's something that came to him a lot later in his career. Overconfidence and the ego is something that can really hold us back and can hold leaders back. So I think people know when we're trying to trick. So what I mean by that is if we're always very confident, people will not just listen to what we say, but they will kind of, it's, as I said before, we're a bit like a contagion, and the neuroscience proves it to us. People also pick up our own emotions or what we are feeling below the surface, not just what we're saying. So sometimes to always show that overconfidence, I know everything, I know what's right, I know what's going on, is not a great idea, because people pick up on that and they'll know that. And that then holds you back. The leadership, that's normally outside the comfort zone. So when that lady in my 20s told me I was an awful leader, I felt terrible for weeks. And why did I feel terrible? Because I felt like I didn't have the tools to correct this problem. I didn't know how to lead better. So I started to read. I asked my father-in-law, who had a very senior leadership position, to talk me through it, to tell me what his top tips were. And then little by little, it became more in my comfort zone. But it's not something that's natural. And it's something that we have to learn as finance professionals. And when I coach individuals, and especially finance professionals, board directors, it's all about this comfort zone. And if we're willing to stretch that comfort zone a little bit to grow and develop more. And I've already spoken about that, not knowing everything. We can never know everything. And the leaders that I absolutely hated to work for were the ones who pretended that they knew everything. Because even if they know everything from their perspective, the people who are touching the customer in an organization probably know what's best for the customer, not someone who sits in the boardroom's ivory tower and never deals with the customer. So I hated working for people who always pretended like they knew everything. I loved it when someone said, I don't have all the answers. Why don't we brainstorm that? Why don't we try and find the answer together? Why don't we work here together? And that principle of unlocking the collective brilliance of the team. And of course, there are many of us, and I say us because I would say I sometimes suffer from the same thing, that little bit of an imposter syndrome that people have. Will people catch us out that we don't have all the answers? Will people know that we're not as good as we say? We all have a little bit of that, and it's totally normal. But the thing is not to let that hold us back, not to let those fears dominate us. So from the research, also very, very clearly that fears are really important, and understanding those fears, that self-reflection in understanding those fears is so important for us to unlock then a different way of doing things. So let's go on and see. Mohammed, could I ask you to launch this poll for us, please? So what do you think holds leaders back in your organization?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Excellent. So what do you think holds the leaders back in your organization? Let's see what you're choosing there. Is it that they try to control? Is it some of those fears? Is it that we expect them to have all of the answers? Tell me what your top 3 are. Hopefully you can choose more this time.
Yes, there are multiple choice, so they can select.
Thank you so much. Let's see what they're choosing.
Okay, we have 30 seconds.
Okay, let's see. Good. Oh, it runs on the screen. So of course, Mohammed, you and I can see how it's running on the screen and which one is winning.
Exactly. Just 2, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let us publish the results. Here you go.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's a big winner there. I think our winner is definitely A, trying to control the situation. Yes. And then the second runner up is number C, expected to have all the answers. Yes. And then another good one there is, oh, I think there's a tie there between B and D. So a tie between the fears and the competitive behaviors. Yes. Oh, and E. So there's a tie there. And yes, no one chose our environment is so collaborative and nurturing that we never see any of this. So excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for sharing that and running it for us. So great. Yes, leaders are held back by these things, and we commonly see these controls or fears that come up. So that concludes my bit on telling you about the research that I did on the global leadership hypothesis. And I did mention that, I think I mentioned when I left corporate life in the first year, I wrote a book. And I wrote a book about authenticity in leadership and why it's so important to be yourself so that you don't get overly stressed or you don't just always want to wear this corporate mask, and how you can unlock more of your own authenticity, but in a natural way where it feels good. And so I thought after this research, what should I do? Should I write a second book? And the title of the book that came to me is The 7 Shifts to the Mastery of Great Leadership. And then I thought, how can I make it really practical for people to understand those shifts that they need to go through to be those great leaders? If these 27 influencers say that this is what's really important, and through my career, I mentioned I mentored and coached quite a lot of people, and I do that now as part of what I do permanently. So it was like, what other things am I seeing? And it all kind of fit together. So these 7 shifts came to mind around where it is that people need to shift to really be better versions of themselves as leaders. So I'd first like to ask you a little bit about your experience. So from what I've said so far and what I've told you so far about all of that research, what do you think the first shift needs to be? So if you could choose one shift, please use the chat box for me and tell me, what would the first thing be that you think a leader needs to shift to if we want to be those great leaders? So use the chat box. Tell me what you think. There are no options here. Just tell me what you think the first shift needs to be. Mindset. Yes, Sabine, very good. So there are no options here. I'm just asking you, what if you think I'm making a shift, what should I do first as a leader? Good. Some self-education there by Yagnesh. Very good. Sabine saying collaboration. Kalimula's showing moving out of the comfort zone. Very good. Kasha saying self-leadership. Yes, very good. Let's see if there's some other views. Anyone have any other views? Yes, get some guidance. Good. Oh, love it, Vina. Self-awareness, yes. The approach in dealing with people, very good. Belief, yes. Yes, fantastic. Yes, I love that. I love the trusting employees, delegating responsibility. Very, very good. Let's go see what the first shift is that I thought we need to create as finance leaders. So what is that first shift? I love it too. Ownership, strategic partner, very good. Improving skills and leadership skills, good. Let me tell you. So my thoughts were on focusing on being agile, but within your mindset. And I'm going to explain just briefly to you those 7 shifts. And then what I'll do is I'll come back to each of those shifts and tell you about each of those shifts in detail. So the first one is that agile mindset. And I really do believe it's the entry ticket. From all the research that I've done and working with people, if you can get your mindset right, you can accomplish anything. If your mindset is very stuck in a backward-looking way, or if you believe that intelligence is static, for instance, and you can't learn, that will really hamper you. And I've met those people in my career. And when I go through that, I'll share some of those stories of how that held them back. The second part is focusing on leading inside out. And a lot of you spoke about self-awareness, about learning about yourself, learning about leadership development. It's really understanding yourself as the second shift first and leading that from that place where I understand myself well, I know what drives and motivates me, I know what my triggers are. And because I know those triggers and I know what can impact me negatively, I am better at leading from the inside out. So that place of, I know how I function and therefore I can lead others better. Mohammed, could you please mute the others for me, because there's a little bit of disturbance in the sound. Thank you. So focus on leading on the inside out as a second option. As a third option, it's that individuals and connected relationships. And this one is really important. You will remember that I said focusing on individuals is a place where people should start. So knowing who are these individuals in my team, what drives each of them, what motivates them, and then when I put them together as a collective, how can I get the most out of them? So one of the very, very important things in shifting our mindset to that individual connected relationship topic. The fourth one is continuous, consistent team development. And I already spoke about how important it is to develop the team together within leadership. So not in terms of doing the work, but more in terms of how we get more out of that collective. And in my teams, in my finance teams, I always had people that were very good at, say, strategy, and others that were better at relationships, because I had HR people in my team. And sometimes it was about pairing them up to work on things together so that one could learn from the other. And so that's why it's so important to understand the dynamics of the individuals, as I said before, and also this how to continually develop them to really crack that nut of helping them to grow and develop themselves, but also as a team. The next one is creating a culture of trust. And I really believe when we don't have a culture of trust, we don't function properly in organizations, because people won't tell us what they really think. And if people don't tell us what they really think, it means that we won't be very successful. We won't be able to drive innovation. We won't be able to drive creativity. And I think so often we know that something is wrong, but we just might not want to say it because everyone is already so far down a track on implementing, and you don't want to be that one person who speaks up and says, this doesn't work, which is very bad for organizations in the end. The sixth shift is anticipating an unknown future. And why is that important? I think one thing that COVID and the pandemic has taught us is that what we think is the given is not the given, especially given business models, given where our organization's long-range plan is or our budget was. Things have totally changed. And I think it will continue to be that way. So it's really important as finance professionals to be able to make decisions with very low levels of information. So as I progressed in those senior leadership positions, especially at the top 300 level of BMW, I realized that sometimes I have to make decisions with 40% of the information. And if I just flash back to my career in my 20s, that would have felt very uncomfortable for me. But because I really grew and I developed and I tried to challenge myself to make decisions even with little information, I was able to do that. And that's one of those shifts that is extremely important, to be able to make decisions with low levels of information. And one theme that runs through everything, that 7 shift, is the responsible leadership shift. And that's about responsible in terms of people, responsible in terms of the environment, responsible in terms of wider thinking, wider value adding, not just being tactical, but thinking more sustainably. And I'm going to explain each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's start with that cultivating an agile mindset, the one that I believe is the absolute entry ticket. And let me tell you a few stories of that and what the ingredients are. So if any of you have ever heard about Carol Dweck, tell me in the chat box if you've heard about Carol Dweck's growth mindset. So I'm looking at my chat box here. Just say yes or no if you've heard about Carol Dweck and her growth mindset. No, let's hear more. Yes, Olaf's heard about it. Let's see some more views. Have you heard about Carol Dweck's growth mindset? That's perfect. Don't worry, Sabine. Okay, so I'm quickly going to tell you about Carol Dweck's growth mindset. So Carol Dweck was a psychologist and a researcher who was really looking at why do some people really outperform and why do others feel like they are stagnating. And she came to the conclusion through all her research was it's about how they think. If they think that their intellectual capacity is static and they can't learn, that they won't be very successful. So she always talks about how Michael Jordan went ferociously at it to become such a good basketball player, and how before that, he wasn't really there. He was still doubting himself. But once he started to really believe he could do it, and he started to push himself, that things happened for him. And so there's this feeling that, is it about the history or can I learn anything? When there's failure, do I look to the past or do I look to the future? So if you haven't come across her yet, and I think many of you haven't, look her up. There are a lot of YouTube videos on Carol Dweck. And just as a very, very simple example, when my daughter was around 5, I think, one of her teachers came and said, she doesn't believe she's very good in maths. And I actually agree with that. And I said, I don't really believe in that. I'd listened to lots of TED Talks about Carol Dweck and I've read her book. And so what I did is I sent my daughter to something called Kumon, where they work through all these maths worksheets. They give you maths worksheets to do every day, 7-8 pages of maths, simple arithmetic. And that's where we started with her. Today, she gets distinctions in maths. She doesn't believe anymore that she can't do maths. She totally believes she can, but because she changed the mindset. Because I said, there's nothing that we can't do. We just need to apply ourselves. We just need to try. So that's growth mindset. And I think the agile mindset is a little bit more than that. So it's a little bit fast forward, a little bit more. It's self-transforming. So we don't stay static. We're in that place where we want to continually learn. And if something happens and it didn't go well, we don't kind of go, oh, that's never going to work. We go, okay, what can I do better? Who can help me with this? Where can I find the answer? So it's continually that feedback around when something doesn't go my way, how can I do it better? How can I find an answer? How can I get someone to help me? So not that wallowing in the fears, but more that directional, okay, I can do this. I can get people to help me. Let me find that person. Continuous learning, I think, is pretty obvious, that you cannot be someone who's not learning if you want to have an agile mindset, because it's also learning from mistakes and fixing them to get to a better place in the future. It's very customer and people centric, having that agile mindset, because you're not just thinking about your perspective, you're also thinking about other perspectives, other feedback, other elements of people coming into the equation and seeing what it is that they need. And then it's very purpose driven. So I always say that purpose has 3 levels to it. There's the level of purpose that's at a very organizational level. Is this organization giving me a good purpose to aspire for? And they're not vision statements. They're very short statements that really emotionally connect with our emotions, and they resonate with the right part of our brain. So that part that engages with emotion, so the less rational part. And just a couple of purpose statements. We grow and develop the builders of tomorrow. Lego, something like that. A Scottish training company that I worked with when I did a training program there, theirs was, we grow and develop people to secure the future of Scotland. So even though they're a training company, they develop people to secure a future of a country. So very emotional, very short, sharp statements that really resonate with us. Why 3 levels? There's that top level, as in the organization's level. There's your level as a team. So one of the game changers for me was to create a purpose statement with my finance team. And one of the first statements that we came up with was, we are enablers of the business. Very short, very sharp. And it really helped us to drive finance, HR, IT, risk, because those were all the areas that reported to me. And it really helped us to be different partners to the business by understanding that all of those areas, our job was to enabling the business. So multiple levels. The last level is, of course, your leadership purpose. So I went on a training once, and I'd never thought about my leadership purpose, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the job you're doing. It's about what is your leadership purpose. When I walked out of this training course, I had decided that my purpose as a leader was to grow and develop the leaders of the future. So that was really my job, to grow, develop people that can take over from me, that can follow in my footsteps. And this was many years ago when I was still in corporate life. And now I train people, I train directors, I train finance professionals, and I had never expected that. And part of unlocking that was finding that purpose, that I wanted to create the next generation of business leaders. That's what I wanted to do within the organization that I was working, and then it helped later. So those are all those ingredients that you need for an agile mindset. Just want to check if there's any questions maybe in the chat box about that. Just pop your question in there if you have one. Yep, I think everyone looks absolutely fine with that, so I'm going to move on. I always like to ask, so what? So what does it do for me if I have this agile mindset? What's going to happen? More adaptability from you as an individual. Today, I would say, so let me just come back to Sabine's question. The 3 levels of purpose: the organizational purpose, the individual purpose as a leader, and the team purpose. So those are the 3 levels of purpose: organizational, team purpose, and individual purpose as a leader. So what does this do for me? You're welcome, Sabine. It makes me more adaptable as a leader. If I have an agile mindset, I'm more adaptable, I'm more resilient. And I see within COVID, those finance professionals, directors that I interact with that are more adaptable are the ones with that agile mindset, who don't get, they they do feel a little bit down sometimes when things get to them, but they're able to take themselves out of it really, really quickly because of their mindset. So that's the thing that pushes them up that curve again. If they've hit that low, they go up that curve quicker to get back to the adaptability. The next thing is resilience. As I've already said, it helps us to recognize possibilities. So what possibilities are there? And the research is showing us that this agile mindset is one of the critical success factors for the future. So without this agile mindset, we can't really be the best we can be. And of course, this is about unlocking potential. It's about helping us to be better. Typical language examples that I will say that don't show that you have an agile mindset, and I see them a lot in finance. We've tried that before. We've done that and it wasn't a success. But I'm not so sure. Will this really make us successful? Yeah, these are all the reasons we can't do it. So it's that the opposite of a can-do attitude sometimes. I dealt with some lawyers in my days who used to advise me when I was the CFO, and they would always tell me what I can't do. But the business needs something. We need to be an enabler to the business. So tell me how we can. So just, if this is what I want and you're saying no, tell me how we can meet somewhere in the middle. It's that approach of trying to make things work, that can do. So those, we can't, we've tried before, this never worked. Those are all language examples of typically not having that agile mindset. Let me tell you quickly about an epic fail. So when I worked for BMW, I've worked in 4 countries for them. I worked in Germany with a guy who was absolutely phenomenal as a finance professional. He could build risk models. He was just so intelligent. The reality is that he thought his intelligence was static. And he could learn new things, but he felt that if other people weren't clever, they could never learn to be clever, and they could never be as good as he was. So he was very analytically minded. He was very driven. He was very, very brilliant. In certain ways, he did far better than I did in those analytical abilities of his. But what happened every year when I sat in his performance appraisal or spoke to the board, that you could say at that time, it was just a group of senior leaders, speaking to them about his potential. They never wanted to promote him. They never wanted to give him a team because he was too clever. He was too analytical. He couldn't relate to people. He was always late. He always thought his pressures were more important than everyone else's pressures. So in the end, he never got promoted. He always had a dream. His dream was to be a finance director, a CFO. And I always find it such a shame. A couple of years ago, I connected with him again, and he's working in a massive company in internal audit. And I always thought it was such a shame that he never learned how to develop those critical relationship skills and how to move away from just the analytical, because he had so much potential. And I think if he was just willing to unlock that potential, he would have really thrived, and especially as a CFO. But unfortunately, it never happened for him because he was too focused on his analytical, intellectual capabilities, and many times telling people why he couldn't do it or why we couldn't do it, instead of focusing on how to make it possible, using some of that amazing intellect of his and channeling to how we could do it. So still such a shame for him, I feel. So let's do this poll. So Mohammed, would you please launch this poll for us and tell me which part of this do you think? So I've just described that agile mindset. So tell me which of these elements do you believe will be most challenging? And choose 2 for me, please. So tell me which ones are most challenging in your opinion. Mohammed, let's give it like a minute and 10 seconds this time.
Okay, sure. I think someone is asking, they cannot see the options. So you can see the screen actually in the polls. There are only options A to F, A to E, but if you want to see the options, you can see the slides and select the options in the poll.
So Mohammed is saying A and C, and Yagnish is saying A and B. Okay, good. Just 10 more seconds. So please make your choice. Okay, let's end the poll, Mohammed. Okay, so we have a couple so there are quite a few A's also from people in the chat box. There's also a B, C, D, and E. So we do have some more E's and a few more D's as well that aren't on the screen. So let's have a look at that. So people are definitely hands up. The winner is the self-transforming, so that continually adapting yourself. And then the next one that's most, I'm just looking at here as well, if we would get a few more. Yes, so E is definitely the next winner, which is all about that purpose orientation. And then there are some people who are saying the people centricity is really difficult. Great, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for voting in the poll. So yes, some of those areas are more difficult than others. And what we need there is a bit of a toolkit to help us to think about how can we develop in those areas. Definitely not impossible. And for someone like me who believes that we can learn anything, it's absolutely possible. So let's look at the crucial ingredients of that second element, which was the focus inside out. So what are those crucial ingredients there? And I think no surprise, many of you already know that self-awareness is really important. I'm just putting your comments closer, so in case there's something in the chat box. Emotional and social intelligence, such a critical thing, emotional and social intelligence. So understanding others, understanding the context within which that happens, very, very important. And I would absolutely say, for any board director, if you have aspirations to be a CFO, to one day climb yourself to the top, this is the most important thing. Can any of you tell me in the chat box, why do I say emotional and social intelligence is the most important thing in the boardroom? Tell me why you think that. Why would I say that? So what are your views? Why is emotional and social intelligence so important in the boardroom? Tell me in the chat box. Yes, bonding and trust. Very, very good, colleague. Yes, to get along with stakeholders. Very good. Yes, to understand the perspective, to match the solution and the requirement. Yes, to be able to sell ideas. Love it, Moses. Yes, definitely. If you're not emotionally and socially intelligent as a board director, you can't read the room. You can't see exactly, you can't develop that partnership leading the wider organization. Very, very good comments from everyone there. You can't sell your ideas. You can't gain the trust. People won't go along with you. So really key areas, crucial for if you want to climb that ladder. And the more senior you become in an organization, the more important that is. And even if you're not that senior, if you're very good at emotional and social intelligence, you will work better in a team. So no matter at which level you are, that emotional and social intelligence is crucial for you as an individual. The next thing about focusing inside out is shifting from that control-based fear. Remember, I spoke before about wanting to have all the answers, wanting to have all of that control. It came out in a poll that that's some of the things you see in your leaders that holds them back. But it's that shifting from control-based, fear-based to going more to a place that's more led through vulnerability and empathy. And what do I mean by that? So if I'm more led by empathy, I'm more people-centric, and I care more about people. So when I have those interactions, I'm going to be thinking about what matters to the other person. What does that person need from me in this moment? So you won't be called an awful leader like I was in my young age, because people know that you are thinking of them as people. And in some of the conversations that I had on the global leadership hypothesis, this came out really, really importantly for leaders, is that leaders need to lead with that empathy, that they care for people, that they understand people have personal lives, and that they understand that sometimes people need more chances. On LinkedIn a couple of months ago, one finance person said to me, but should you give people multiple chances? Should you have empathy with them when they're missing a deadline? And I said, you of course need to, because we don't know necessarily what's going on in their lives. We don't know what's going on for them. And I'll tell you a story a little bit later about CJ Kujenga, who I also interviewed, who told me a little bit more about how important that was. What I think is really important is to know what people say about you as a leader, as an individual, when you leave the room. So when you're leaving the room and people are saying things like, oh, she's too tough. So many times in my career, people would leave the room and say, she's too tough. If people are thinking I'm too tough, they might not tell me what they really think. And if they don't tell me what they really think, I might fail, because we might make a mistake. We might do something where people aren't really bought into it. So that's really, really important to think about. What do people say when you leave the room? And how did I find out? I asked my head of HR one day to just get a sense for me. Tell me, be open with me. What do people say? And she was the one who said to me, they say you're too tough. So I learned that I had to soften my approach. I was originally born in South Africa. You might recognize my accent. So I can be very direct. And this same HR professional, I had such a good relationship with her later in my career. I actually took her to work in that when I joined the top 300 and went to a more senior position. I poached her to go with me to the next organization as well, because she was such a great ally. But what she would say to me is, make sure that people don't see you that tough. If people see you that tough, they won't respond. So she would always she would have the permission to say to me, you have your scary face on now. And I say that in a joking way, but sometimes we have to give people permission to tell us, especially if you have a very senior role. People react sometimes to that role that we have. So it's understanding that people will feel a certain way because we carry that title of CFO. People will respond to us in a certain way. In one of the companies that I work now, we're going to run a workshop to understand how people are really feeling. But I know I'm the chair of audit, so I can't really chair that. I'm a trainer too, so I could easily run an engagement session on Zoom. But will they really tell me because they see me as the chair of audit? So sometimes it's about understanding those hidden things that aren't said, that are said when you left the room, so that you can be more successful. So what? Again, my so what, how does this help me? So if I know more about myself and I'm leading more from the inside out, I am less affected by the external environment. My boss can push my buttons less. So sometimes bosses can trigger you, other people can trigger you, but if you understand your own triggers, you will be triggered less. And of course, that's a little bit like a superpower. It doesn't mean we ever turn off the trigger. So one of the CFOs that I mentor, when he goes to the board, he's always very, very upset when he gets back. And we had to talk about, why does he get so upset? And he got so upset because one of his key values is that he is transparent. It's really important to him to be transparent. He's transparent. He shows them the numbers. They want higher numbers. They're unhappy with him. He gets angry. So, and that's that play. He had to understand, I'm being transparent. He had to understand and say, these are not my numbers. These are the numbers coming from the organization. So if you want higher numbers, we need to push other people more. And I mean, looking at the people in the room, those other board directors that drive those sales areas, perhaps we need to look at them to drive that a little bit. So once I unlocked that awareness for him, it was much easier for him to deal with that topic. So Greater gravitas and influence. That's something that I often hear that finance professionals don't have. So sometimes in those appraisals, when people are appraised, people would say, they don't have enough gravitas, they don't have enough influence. These are all just indicators that people don't have enough soft skills and they haven't really self-developed enough. And of course, building better relationships is one of the key issues there. So I want to just say to you, I just mentioned it, this is one of the things that limits potential the most. So when I sit in those conversations about leaders, when leaders don't understand themselves, they don't have this self-awareness, they don't have this emotional and social intelligence, this is what holds them back. It holds them back from being promoted, it holds them back from creating high-performance teams, and it holds them back very much from being the best leader that they can be. So I would really say this is one of, after the mindset, this is the most crucial shift to make. And a real success story here that I'd quickly like to tell you about. So Margaret was a lady that I knew who was working in a very male-dominated environment, and they were all very driven, the guys there. They were almost like fist on the table if things weren't happening. And she was very, very unhappy. And she went home, she was unhappy for months actually, and she was starting to get sick. And one day when she went home, I think her 3-year-old, 4-year-old daughter said, "Mommy, you're always so unhappy when you come from work." And it was almost like an absolute light bulb moment for her to understand that something needed to change in her life. So she started a process. She started to read more about understanding herself, emotional intelligence, social intelligence. She got a coach, and that coach went on a journey with her. She read my book. We spent some time on discussing it because I knew her as a friend. I went for dinner with her. We discussed some of the topics. We also had a couple of online sessions. And over, I'd say it was 9 months, she absolutely transformed. And it wasn't that anything changed in her working environment. It was just that she changed. Some people asked her, "Why are you so happy? You know, what's going on with you? Have you won the lottery? What's going on? Are you going to have a baby?" And it was none of that. It was just that she invested a lot in herself. She wasn't being triggered so much by the people around her anymore. So a real success story there. And it always makes me think the more you grow and develop yourself, the more successful you will be. So let's run a poll again. Mohammed, could you please run the next poll for me? Let's see. Why do you think some leaders shy away from traditional soft skills and leadership training? So is it because we don't have time? Is it uncomfortable? Let's see what your thoughts are. So Mohammed has put that poll up for us. Let's see. And if you couldn't do the poll, please put it in the chat box for me. If you can't see the poll, hopefully you can. Let's see. Where do you think the problem is? No toolkit, and the comfort zone is winning hands down at the moment. Let's see if a couple more people vote. Yeah, Moses also likes D&E. Let's see. Good, the votes are climbing. Let's see, a couple more votes there. Let's give it 10 more seconds, Mohammed. Good. So there are our results. There's only one there. So let's see what's the winner. It's uncomfortable, outside the comfort zone. It's a hard sell. People don't see the value. I'm worried about that. I'm very worried about that, that people don't see the value in these leadership skills. And then D, yes, no toolkit. Yes, I totally get that. If there's no toolkit, then we don't know. Okay, good. So thank you for doing that poll. It's very traditionally what I see. There's no toolkit. It's outside our comfort zone. There's no, it takes too much effort sometimes. The hard sell really confuses me. And I suppose it confuses me because I walked that journey of doing HR and of seeing so many people who did it and really thrived because of it. So I suppose it's about perspective, but as you guys say, it's really hard sometimes to convince leaders to do it because they're not so bought into. All I can say to you is, from training thousands of different people, hundreds of people at board level, it's really, really the thing that sets people aside from good leaders, the really excellent leaders from the other leaders are the ones that have those business critical skills. They are the ones who really do better and thrive more. So if there's one thing that you take away from me today, believe me, that's one of the things that is really making a bigger difference, especially when I sit in the boardroom and I look at leaders and I train boardroom leaders. Those are the things that really stand out. So let's go into the third one, the focus on individuals and connected relationships. What is the crucial ingredient there is the strength-based approach, understanding what each of the individuals in my team's strengths are. I don't believe too much in focusing on weaknesses, because I think if we focus on our strengths and we have others help us, that we can be strong in many different things. We don't always need to be the best at everything. We need to know what we are strong at, and then we need to surround ourselves with people who are very good at the other things. One thing that happened to me, I was very involved with driving very big projects at one stage. I had strategy, I had HR, I had finance, I had risk, IT, many different areas. What happened to me is I had to travel quite a lot. I was driving really big projects. And by understanding the strengths of the people in my team, so there was one guy, actually my finance guy was very, very good at strategy. And my HR person was not as good at strategy. And what would happen is if I went away and she had quite a few questions, we were launching an HR strategy. By knowing the strengths in the team, I could say to her, go ask that guy. He has all the answers. On strategy, he thinks the same as me. We have a similar approach. And so she would always leverage those conversations with him and get better at that. But because I knew their strengths, because I knew who to match with who in which topics. So I'm very much about, when you're focusing on individuals and connected relationships, think about that strength-based approach. Unconditional respect for difference. I think sometimes people are not exactly the way like we are. I'll give the classic example. I was a very bad board director at the beginning because I thought the sales and marketing director was an idiot. And of course, we've spoken about it in this session, that there's neuroscience and that our bodies are giving off some vibes. So even if I said the perfect thing to him, he knew that I thought he was an idiot. And one of his people told me that. And it was obviously how I was interacting with him. So I think it's so important if you want to climb that ladder. And that guy that I spoke about, who was so intelligent and had so much potential, the problem is, if people weren't like him, he thought they were idiots. And that's the problem with it. We can never create good working relationships. We can never be good partners, business partners. We can never be good finance directors, finance professionals, if we don't have that respect for difference and understand when someone is different from us, they just have different skills. And it's one thing that I really had to learn, not to judge others so much, because when we do judge people, that's when we don't form connected relationships. And it's one of those things of really being self-reflective and thinking about it, because it's not natural. We always have an instantaneous judgment of other people. And it's really important not to, or to control that. I just want to keep my eye on the chat box as well. I'm going to bring it over here in case someone wants to ask me something. And celebrating diversity of thought. It's really important when we're brainstorming. So the more I develop, the more I realize that when I brainstorm now with people in the team, when I run big change projects, I always ask to have people from different areas that think differently, more creative people with finance people. And then I make sure that they suspend judgment and have a little bit more respect for each other. And then the creativity starts to flow. So I do exercises with them to make that baseline better, that they respond to each other better. And then one sees all this natural diversity of thought comes out much, much better. So what again? So what will I get from this? of course, we will get more creativity, more innovation, more collective brilliance, more people together. You know, there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go far, you should go together. If you want to just go a short way, then you can go alone. So I really think harnessing that collective brilliance is extremely important. I've mentioned creativity and innovation. And the other thing that being connected does, and focusing on what is important for an individual, is it actually builds trust. It builds trust and it builds strong relationship. So if you're a business partner, having these focus on what the strengths are of the other person, learning to suspend your judgment. When people aren't good at budgeting, we normally will judge them as finance. It's suspending all those things and thinking, you know, I have a lot more of the skill in that area. Let me help them. Maybe I can learn something from them too in something else. And so it's really building those strong relationships with each other. So an epic fail here, I said I would speak about CJ Kujenga. So CJ normally worked for very big consulting firms at the early parts of her career before she left and went into industry and became a CFO. So she is currently also a CFO. But she says early in her career, she wanted everything the CJ way. So my way or the highway was kind of how she would say it. And she said she had one lady who worked for her in her early career, and this lady wasn't performing very well. And no matter what she tried, she just didn't perform. And CJ said she had so many conversations with her, but it just didn't work. And then CJ moved her into another area, asked another leader if he could please have her because she just couldn't work with her. And so this lady moved out of CJ's area. And CJ tells the story that she kept an eye on this lady's career because she wanted to see how this lady was going to progress in the organization. And what did she find? She found that actually this lady thrived in other positions and climbed herself up. So CJ always had this little nagging thing in the back of her mind. What did I do wrong? And so when we were having this conversation, CJ told me something that she hadn't told many people. She said, you know, I found out that she actually had a problem at the time that she worked with me. She had a personal problem, but because I wasn't focused on her as an individual, I was judging her more. I was judging her work all the time. I wasn't trying to understand her perspective. What really happened is she never felt that she trusted me to tell me that there was a problem. So CJ thought that she'd always missed an opportunity there, because this lady worked very well for other people, but there were other people who were able to adjust their approach to her as an individual leader and what she needed to thrive. So CJ came up with it, you know, it was my fault really as a leader for not being able to bring out the best in her. And that's what I think the main thing is here. We need to bring out the best in those people that we work with. I'm going to move on to consistent, continuous team development and those crucial ingredients. And purpose is an absolute guiding light. I spoke in the agile mindset about purpose, about understanding the purpose within our mind, but it's just as important at the team level. I said there was those 3 levels, and this is exactly where this purpose comes in. And with my team, it was an absolute game changer. Because when we all, I mentioned before, we said we were enablers of the business. Once we came to this place that we are enablers of the business, there was no more saying, no, we can't. There was, how can we? Because we're an enabler. So we have to say, how can we make this work? How can we do this? One of the other things in my finance teams, it was financial services where I started out as a CFO. It wasn't very natural to develop people to come up behind you in the organization. And there were many times where I would ask, well, who's taking over from you when someone wanted to move on? And there would be no one. So no one had been developed to do that. And so it's really important that engagement, engaging purpose to help to develop people. So one of the things that we also decided on is that part of our purpose was to develop leaders. So all of us, all those back office functions, we also needed to develop people as our purpose. So we had to spend time on 2 things, not just being enablers of the business, but also being developers of people. So that's what that leadership team then very much focused on, those two elements. And I try to make it that people spend a lot of time on developing people too. So a really guiding light purpose. What we need to do is engage our teams daily, weekly, monthly, to develop them as a team, to develop them as a collective, to develop them as a high-performing team. Not just talking about the work. I ditched those meetings that I call the show and tell meetings, where everyone would just come and tell me what they're working on. Telling me what they're working on, I think that's fine, but I would rather only know when they have problems. So they're empowered to produce, and I'm there to support them. So if they have a problem, I'd love them to come tell us as a group so that we can maybe collectively work together on how can we solve the problem collectively together. Or I'd rather spend more of my time on actually brainstorming with them, speaking about what our strengths are, developing further as a leadership team, how can we engage, develop other people more. So it's those leadership themes, and not only once or twice a year when you have an away day, which is kind of the norm. And it's being that facilitator and coach, being more of a facilitator, coach to the whole team, but also to those individuals within the team. Again, my question about so what? Purpose creates a sense of belonging. That we're the enablers and we're the developers of people that really connected with people. They really understood what I expected of them, and they understood how they fit in within that purpose. It also creates a very desirable team dynamic. So people on average stayed in my teams longer because of this engaging purpose, not just, oh, well, we're responsible for the numbers or creating the numbers or whatever. We really have this bigger purpose that we're there for. It also is the number one ingredient, or one of the number one ingredients of a high performing team purpose. And as I said already, it was a real game changer for me and my team. So Mohammed, could you load this poll for us now? I want to know from you, what have you done with your team? So, or if you're in a team and you're not a leader within the team, tell me what has been done with you. Which one of these activities have you already done as a team member? So creating that engaging team purpose, looking at what the strengths are of the team, maybe doing something like a values exercise. What is your communication language in your group? So when you're ready, please exercise your choices in the poll. I'll give you a couple of seconds to read it. Ooh, we'll need more people to vote on this one. We don't have enough votes yet. Let's see. Let's give it 10 more seconds, Mohammed, just to give some people a little bit more time. Good, let's see. So, okay, and Nira would like to choose B. Okay, so creating an engaging team purpose. So many people have done that. Very, very good. Individual strengths, or the second winner is the brainstorming. Yes, I think that's such an amazing thing to do with a team, even if you're the leader. It's the unboss comment that we had before. Yes, unbossing it. And then also the strengths, yes. And no one has done the safety with the team. Yes, psychological safety is what Google calls the #1 high-performing ingredient, is psychological safety. And if you're interested in that, look at the work that Leader Factor does, because they do those assessments. They're very, very good. So the Leader Factor, Dr. Timothy Clark. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your views there. Let's go on to building a culture of trust. And you'll see that in a culture of trust, it's exactly about psychological safety. And the difference here is it's about whether I feel safe or whether I feel like I have a gun to my head. Do I feel safe to perform, Or do I feel like you're holding the gun to my head, and if I say something, you're going to pull the trigger, something that you don't like, it's going to blow up my career, it's going to ruin our relationship, whatever it is. So very much the culture of trust is about building that psychological safety in a team. And it's extremely important as a finance professional to know how to do that. It's appreciating unique contributions, a little bit back to our strengths also, and knowing that people have different communication styles. And it's about focusing on behaviors that drive transformation, knowing what those behaviors are that will help us with that, and how do we push them so that we actually get that transformation that we need. Why? There's this phrase that truth is not spoken to power. Remember, I said a little bit before, sometimes people just saw my position. If they didn't interact with me a lot, they just saw my position. I'm the CFO with a big brand like BMW, so they wouldn't really tell me what they really think. But what that means is that the truth doesn't reach us. And if the truth doesn't reach the power in an organization, the organization will make the wrong decisions. And then we won't be as effective as we can be. So really, really important that we do want truth to power. We do want role modeling of those behaviors that are the right behaviors to create that trust in teams, that adaptive behavior that makes sure that we create safety, that people feel safe to speak up, that we have that creative brilliance, to our point before. And this is what really unlocks team potential. There's this thing called discretionary effort. And I don't know if any of you have heard about discretionary effort, but when things are hard, we want people to give us more effort. We want them to give us that extra bit of effort. Not that they say, it's 9 o'clock, I'm sitting in front of my computer now in the morning, and at 12 o'clock, I'm taking my hour break, even though things are absolutely exploding and there's a huge challenge to deal with. They just watch their clock. They're not giving us discretionary effort. Their hearts, minds, souls are not with us. Their hands might be with us, but not their hearts and their souls. And so it's that discretionary effort that we want to unlock that's just way beyond just the work. And that's also when you have that team culture of trust, that team culture of performing together, you will get that. My top tip here for you is during COVID, I ran an engagement session with a finance team, and the CFO and I were talking, and he said, my team's become extremely silo orientated again. I need a bit of help with breaking those silos down in my team. And I suggested to him that the very first thing he did when we started is to tell people how he feels about COVID. And what that does is it shows them that they're allowed to be vulnerable. They're allowed to say what they really think. So in effect, by saying how he really felt, he was giving them permission to say what they really felt. So my top tip is, when you want people to trust and to tell, you have to give first. And he really started well by saying, I hate it. I hate that I have to work at home all the time without my team. I get my energy from my team. I feel enthused. I feel innovative. Without people around me, I feel like I'm just sitting in this box all on my own. And he used his words, not my words. And he really spoke about, how he also felt about how bad it was with people dying and so much sadness. And that really set up that session. And what did we find at the end? The one common thread, and people were voting anonymously. They said they want more empathy from each other. So by the end of the session, I almost fell off my chair, because this group of finance professionals, the one thing that they all wanted to work on and wanted to work on more is how to be more empathetic with each other. So really, really start with being more in a vulnerable place as a leader yourself, and people will give reciprocity. They will respond. So let's see, we have another poll, Muhammad. So just yes or no. So tell me, do you think you speak up in your organization to those most senior people or to your leader? Do you tell them what you really think? So what are your views? And if you don't, just think about most of the people in your organization. Do they, don't they? Or most of the people in your team? Tell me what you think. Do you speak up? Don't you speak up? Are you afraid? Just 10 more seconds, because I think this is an easy one. It's just yes or no. So let's do 10 more seconds, Mohammed. Great. Interesting. Almost 69% says yes, but there's still that 31% that doesn't. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for being so open about it. Let me tell you about something that happened recently. I ran a session for a big company in Canada, and I did a keynote and training session for their 350 top staff. And I suggested that we put this question into them, and the people in HR said, we know we'll have 70%. So exactly almost your results now, 69%, they said we'll have 70. What was really interesting, when those leaders for that company globally gave the answer to this, the answer was less than 50 said we can really speak up. And that was a real surprise to HR. They hadn't suspected that such a big group of their leadership population would say that. So they've gone away and they've changed some of the things that they do because of that, because they believe that that's then a key issue for them in their organization. So a good tip is also to ask this question, maybe in your survey, or do people really feel like they can speak up? Really crucial. So we're almost there. We're on the second last shift. I'm just looking at the time to see where we are. So embrace an unknown future. We all understand that there are trends that are changing. But for us as finance professionals, it's really important to understand what are those changing trends, how do they impact the business, and how do they impact the way we do things. Just think about COVID. Think about how many organizations will do more home working now. We don't need all those big properties that we need to pay rent on. So, it's really good to start thinking, how do things change? What is changing? And anticipating it so that we can add value to the business. It's also about prediction when we don't know. And I really believe we need to ask powerful questions, and we need to train ourselves to ask those powerful questions. It will give us resilience, especially from an organizational context, but also as a person. Just as a personal example, I had never anticipated leaving BMW. I had never anticipated that I would climb all the way to the top 300, get there, look around me and feel that I wasn't so inspired by all the people in the room. Hadn't ever anticipated that. So I didn't build very strong networks outside the company. All my networks were in the company. So it really made me very afraid, because it was only 3 years later that I left. But it was like a fear in the bottom of my tummy the whole time when I was planning to leave, about my network is not good enough. My network outside is not big enough. If I had anticipated that a little bit earlier, sooner, I could have changed the way I did things. So really important for resilience. Staying power, to stay with the game and to be mentally tough. And of course, it will help you with your risk approach if you're looking more at alternatives from a personal perspective, but also as a finance leader. Yeah, my top tip is pre-mortem. So one way to think more possibility is when you're in the throes of a process, whatever it is, a budget process, a strategic process. It works really well with a strategic process. Just before you finish the strategic process, to ask, why will we fail? Why will we fail? And you ask it, let people do it on post-it notes. Don't ask in the room and let people answer, because once one person answers, we all will follow. But rather do it post-it notes, facilitate it, take it up. Then what are people's views? Or do it virtually, more with sharing screens and getting anonymous votes. Because it's really important to know why you will fail before you actually implement, because then you can think about other possibilities, other ways to do things. Responsible leadership, it's about meaning, and it's about meaning in every aspect of our work and enthusing people about that meaning. And it's about well-being. thinking about human well-being. How can we be resilient? How can we do things in a different way because we have human beings working for us? Also seeing that wider impact, the planet and the limited resources, and thinking, what can that do for our business models? Changing business models. Young millennials put their money where there's meaning, and also in the products they buy. And at some stage, those millennials will have the worldwide income. So if we're looking long term, we really need to move that way from an organizational perspective. For some people, working is about their individual fulfillment. If they can't resonate with the purpose, they're very unhappy. And some people don't even know. They just have this underlying feeling of I'm unhappy and they don't understand why. Many times it's about purpose. It's about seeing opportunities in impact, also in doing wider things, in generational engagement. And I think the future implications are quite serious. The CEO of BlackRock, which is the biggest investment company in the world, wrote to CEOs last year. And he said that it's his duty to think about initiatives that are more green, and that's where BlackRock will be spending their money. So in future, what will happen to organizations who don't embrace more social sustainability? They might not get funding. They might not be able to get clients. They might not be able to get work because certain criteria in getting work might be how green are you? How sustainable are you? So those are all things that we as finance professionals really have to think about. So those were the 7 shifts: the mindset, the inside out, the individual and connected relationships, the team development, the culture of trust, the anticipating the unknown future, and the responsible leadership. So another poll for us. It's our second last poll for the evening. Could you please load it for me, Mohammed? Tell me, which 2 shifts would you like to focus more time on? So if you just look at this, which are the 2 shifts where you say, these are the 2 that I think I want to work at? So we've had 2 people that have voted. Let's get some more votes. Oh, there's a clear front runner here already. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. There's no option 6, so 6 is missing. Tell me in your chat, in the chat box, please, if you wanted to change the unknown future, if you wanted to choose that. So tell me. So I think Olaf probably wanted to choose that. And yes, definitely. So Nadajan wanted to choose that. Hafizullah wanted to choose that. Okay, so that's really important, the unknown future. Would have had, let's see, 5 votes for that. Yeah, excellent. Good. So it's as important as that being the responsible leader. Good. So there's our results. And we had quite a lot of people who say the agile mindset. Yes, probably because I also said that was one of the most important things to choose. And then we had the being a responsible leader was our second runner-up. I'm just making some notes so that I know what was really important to you. And then we had quite a few votes on the unknown future. And then after that, there was the tie between number 2 and 3. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your results. The mindset is the one that I see the most. And I also see a lot of people wanting to build this culture of trust because they understand that without trust, people won't necessarily have a high-performing team. So I also see that, but I see that a lot more at the board level. So at the board level, I see lots of board directors choosing this number 5. Good. So what light bulb went on for me after I did these 7 shifts? I decided that, should I write a second book? Should I help with a second book so that people can read about it and see how to do it? And I decided that I think people need a toolkit. So one of the things that you chose was that there's not a toolkit to do this. And I thought the toolkit was really the way that we could help people to understand how to do it. So I decided to rather build a training course and make it really, really practical for finance professionals and use that dual skill of mine, that finance professional, but also that HR side, and combine that to help people to get more comfortable with these softer things, or some of these things that are more outside our comfort zone and probably more challenging for us. And so I designed it around 5 archetypes, and it's the agile, purpose-driven leader, the influential, connected leader, the transformational strategic leader, the one who can drive transformation, knows about strategy, the responsible, impactful leader, so is thinking in that wider context and around wider value, or that reflective leader. And the reflective leader is something that runs through all of this. So I didn't ever discuss the reflective leader, but we discussed the self-awareness, the emotional intelligence. It all starts with reflection. Someone mentioned that in the chat box right at the beginning. If we reflect, we'll be far more successful. And I don't mean the reflection where you have that monkey in your head that tells you all those negative things, but I mean the reflection in a good way. So those are those 5 archetypes. And Mohammed, will you give us a go with our very last poll for the night? You've been so good and engaging. So I'll ask you one more, and then we're going to I'm going to hand over to Mohammed, and we can take any questions also. So let's see what you think. Which archetypes would you like to develop more? Ooh, what's happened? No one's voted. Oh, there we go. There we go. Excellent. I was thinking you'd all left me. There we go. We've had 8 people voting so far. Let's see who else is going to vote. I think just give it 10 more seconds. It is the last poll. People are probably getting a little bit tired. It's already quite late in Dubai. So let's just go to a minute, Mohammed, and then let's close it. Excellent. Good. Let's see. Agile, purpose-driven and influential wins. Hands down. And actually it's going, yeah, it's going down to the bottom. Less people want to be the reflective leader. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your results there with me. So let's see. So in summary, for me, through this career of mine with working with thousands of leaders and hundreds of board directors, it's really about every interaction that's really about people. And when we are with our team, it's an opportunity really to grow and develop with that team. And if we're not using those opportunities, we're probably not living to our full potential, which is, of course, what we all want to do. We all want to unlock more potential in ourselves and in others. So use that opportunity. Every interaction is an opportunity to grow and develop more. So if I want to hand over to Sesha now, to Mohammed Session. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Talita. I think it was a wonderful session on the leadership development, and thank you for sharing all the insights and learning. So just if you can, anyone ensure you can see my screen? Talita, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So as if you are interested to go further deep dive into all the learnings that we have today with Talita, so we have designed this accelerated finance leadership program with Talita, where she is going to deep dive more into all of the areas that we have discussed today. As you can see, there is an exciting lineup of topics, including the agile, purpose-driven, the influential, connected leader, transformational, strategic leader, responsive, innovative leader, reflective leader, as Talita already explained during her session. So these are really very important, I think, areas for you if you are really aspiring to reach to the C-suite level, or you are trying to climb up your corporate ladder. So I think these are really the necessary skill set that is required on the soft side. And as we all know that there are lots of professionally qualified accountants in the market, like is CA qualified, ACCA, CIMA. But what really differentiate you is your leadership and soft skills, that you can compete in this highly competitive talent market where there is excess supply of talent. And even if you are already in your leadership role, you can really develop these skills to make influence and impact in your organization. So these are the all areas that we are going to cover. It's a really highly interactive program. As you can see on your screen, it includes 5 modules that is taught via 5 live virtual classes that is going to be held every Sunday. I'm going to tell you further detail. We will be having a peer group sessions as well. And as you all know, this program is purely based on Talita's own experience and also based on her research that she did along with many C-suite and globally renowned leaders in the area of finance. And she already giving training to the directors, C-suite. So all this learnings and amazing learning and leadership development that she has, she can obviously bring into this program and you can learn from it. And if you are interested, there will be some free session that will be given to you during this program, including the courses, the book synopsis, the live presentation, survival guide. It's all developed by Talita that will be given to all the participants. She will be the trainer for this program. So if you are interested, you can just enroll, and you can also get your program certificate from UK, from Accelerated Solutions based in UK, that is owned by Talita, Authentic Change Solutions. And these are the commencement date. As you can see, we are going to start this on 5th of September. The classes will be from 7 to 9 p.m. every Sunday, Dubai time. And the duration is the 2 months time, and it will be also recording sessions as well as some live sessions will be there. And there are the fees, and there are some early bird discounts. So this is really an excellent opportunity for you if you really want to work on your leadership development on all these 5 areas, as Talita already mentioned. So this is the chance for you to enroll into this program and really learn from the experience and unique blend of experience of Talita. So that's all from our side. Talita, if you would like to add anything about the program to all the audience, so please go ahead.
I suppose the important thing is if anyone has any questions, I think we could maybe ask if there are any questions. I think you did it so well, Mohammed. I couldn't do it better myself. So,
you have any questions, please drop it in the chat box so we can try to address as maximum. We have still 7 minutes left.
You can also ask me any other questions. You don't have to necessarily ask me about the content.
Yeah, and even you can unmute yourself. There is an option. If you want to speak up, please speak. And or if you want to drop in the chat box, you can drop in the chat box. Feel free to ask.
Talita, this is Khalid.
Hello, Khalid.
Yeah, so exciting to learn from you. I had a similar career path in my latter part. I spent most of my time as a CFO, but then in my last 2-3 years at Novartis, I got an opportunity to get into as head of HR. And I think in my career at the HR, I learned more in HR. And I think it was far more rewarding because we were developing people. The most important asset of the company is people, our people. So I think I can totally relate to your career transition. And now that you're focusing on developing leaders, I think that's what the world actually needs today. They need great leaders to speak up against social injustices that is happening across the world. People need to be brave and courageous. And yeah, the fear is something, fear of failure and wanting to control everything is something that the accountants and finance people love. And that's what is, I totally agree that this doesn't allow them to grow as true leaders in the organization. So people who are genuinely interested in developing people around them, they are seen as true leaders. So thank you so much for sharing. I really look forward to your session in the future. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for that comment. I think you're also making me think of something else. I think on the CFO's agenda and the finance team's agenda is so much transformation. And we kid ourselves if we think transformation is not about people. I'm still to find even the biggest technological implementation that doesn't need people to take it on board. So everything, even if we implement a system, we need people to use the system. So I think that people orientation, Khalid, really came to me when you were speaking, that it's important for our future for transformation as well. And so thank you for all your comments. They resonate so much. Thank you very much.
Incidentally, we're doing today with Mohammed a project on business analytics and finance transformation. And one of the things, whenever we talk about strategy, we talk about customers and vendors and so on. But then I made them realize that no, it's people first. So organization is all about people, right? So if you have the right people, right capability, right culture, you are a winning organization. Even if you have the best strategy, and if you don't have the right culture, you'll never win. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. So I have a couple of questions here. There was one about, I can't see it now. I think it's a little bit.
Yeah, it's Talita, how leadership styles vary from geography to geography.
Yes. I think the pieces that don't change in geography is the agile thing. That doesn't change. I think purpose doesn't change. I think the geography could impact how people outside an organization think about it, but you as the leader need to think it because it's a way to motivate and inspire others. And I think that won't change from the geography. I also think the understanding yourself, understanding people, creating those relationships where you have a win-win is also something maybe you need to tweak a little bit how you do it, because there are cultural differences. And what I mean by that, so in South Africa, people are very direct. So I would be a bit more direct with my style when I'm dealing with someone one-to-one. But in the UK, I can't be that direct. I must more tease things out. But the principles remain the same. And Germany is somewhere in between. And the US, I'm sure, is different. I'm on the board of a US company and it's different there. And I'm sure in the UAE, it will be very different too. But there are nuances. So I think there's a baseline that's the same, but then there are nuances up or down. I hope that answers it for whoever asked that question. I think the baseline's the same. It's nuances that you have to change.
Great. I think that's an excellent answer. And there is one more question. To motivate staff, is it key to connect key performance indicators to financial rewards?
And more. So I think motivation is not just about, so it depends on what those key performance indicators are. I think the key performance indicators must not just be about tangible things, it must also be about behaviors. So Khalid spoke about, he spoke about culture, and culture is nothing more than behaviors. And I think if part of your key performance indicators is also role modeling the right behaviors, and they should be clearly mapped out what they are, then I think, yes, it's good to link that to your financial rewards. If your financial rewards are only about volume, profit, the tangible quantitative, I think it's not very sound. So it has to be how you deliver your, so what you deliver, but also how you deliver. So those behavioral pieces. And by the way, the organizations that I see that are really, really good, they take those values and behaviors that they want lived and they put them in their appraisals. And then those organizations are the ones who change the cultures, who are able to drive change properly. The ones who only have the performance measures in terms of quantitative, they sometimes get that people don't behave properly. And so they're not as successful. So I hope that answers it for that person.
Completely, I think I agree with you, Talita. I think here most of the finance leader professionals need to change their mindset, because their focus is on tangibility, objectivity, materiality, and they don't even, I think, consider beyond that, and the intangible assets that really adds tremendous amount of value to the company, like as you mentioned, leadership, culture, yeah, human capital, corporate brand. Obviously, these are not even recognized in our traditional accounting system. So yeah, I think completely agree with you all on your points.
That's why
Okay,
I
so
hope, that's why I hope companies have a balanced scorecard where they
yeah,
work on financial, customer, process, and people.
yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
they're all weighted, you know?
And even the intangible assets, they account for almost more than 90% of the, the company valuation of even this big giants like Apple, Microsoft. If we see Google, if you see the like intangible, they account for almost more than 90% of their company valuation, which are not even recognized in our accounting system.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
true.
really, we need to shift that mindset really. Okay, I
Great
think I
comment.
can't see any more questions. So that's all. I think it's a
Just
yes,
one
yes, yes,
comment.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So we are, in fact, I'm calling from Pakistan, and we have a younger population, a huge bulge of younger population. And so in the organization, we have multi-generation people. So we have people who in 50s and 60s, then we have the middle segment in the 30s and 40s, and then we have the younger ones. And I see a great deal, the younger people are, of course, far more tech savvy and much more agile. They want change. They don't want to be tied up to 9 to 5, whereas their bosses or the seniors are 9 to 5 guys. So it's quite challenging that who should change. I don't want the younger guys to become like the older guys. So that is the dilemma for me as a leader, that how do I fit these 2-3 different types of people in the organization, that I know that they should all be, they are all in succession, but culturally they have become so different. They all have different needs. The more senior people feel insecure because of the younger generation pushing up. The middle guys are worried, and the younger guys require far more responsibility quicker, and they want much more challenging role. They don't like 9 to 5 or routine jobs. So Talita, help me.
You know, I think it's very much, I can understand what dynamic you have very much there, because you have people at the top who are probably, if they're honest, quite fearful that things will change and they won't be able to control it. So I did a project at a very large organization where it was about being more flexible in the working environment. And there were a lot of, exactly as you say, people who had more of that traditional mindset of wanting to work from 9 to 5, and many of them even a lot later, and exactly the same dynamic. And I would say the way to get past that is really that respect for difference, of understanding that some people work differently to bring out their best. And what you want is people to bring out their best. But the other thing that I realized was really in that project was staring us in the face, and we didn't understand. Leaders didn't know how to manage output. They thought they needed to manage people in presence. So if you present, you must be working, which I think is an absolute fallacy, if I'm honest, because how do I know what you're doing behind your computer? You know, if we're in a big office, if you're there for 12 hours, are you really working for 12 hours? It's impossible to work for 12 hours straight. So I think it's that two-way street of letting go of control, respecting that people want to do things differently, and then giving it in a way where people can choose to work in the way that they are motivated best. And if you can't do it, it means that there's a cultural issue within the organization. And it's about then changing the underlying culture, which will take you a while to do, but is the right thing to do in that case, because I think you will lose really good talent if you don't change.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about having talent. If you don't have the talented people, you know, the older generation or the traditional mindset will retire at some stage. And so, you know, it's something that you need to make that shift. But I would also say you need sponsors for that. You need sponsors for that at the board level, that people recognize that things are needing to change. If you don't have those sponsors, I have to say, I'm really sorry, but I don't think you'll move it a dial.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Salida, for taking some more time to answer all the questions. Thanks a lot for the wonderful session. And thank you all the audience. And we will upload the recording of this whole session on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. So if anyone wants to revisit, or if some of you missed to attend it live, you can just access it. And we hope to see in our upcoming sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for being such
Good
great
night.
participants.
Stay safe and take care. Good night.
Ciao.
Good night. Tata.